All right, you are listening to the A Word to the Wise lecture series, Genesis episode 2. In the last lecture, we covered Genesis, its relation to the book of Revelation, which I'm thinking about doing next, just because we live in interesting times. A lot of weird things are happening, and I think a lot of the answers to that, at least theories, whatnot, can be gathered from the book of Revelation. Let's see. We covered the first Earth Age, or the world that then was. We created sixth day creation of man, and we went into the creation of Ha-Adam, the Adam, on the eighth day. What else? I also mentioned, and I wanted to open it up with this, a book talking about Cain and a possible linking between Cain and Sargon the Magnificent of the ancient Assyrian Babylonian area. It's very interesting, and I think there's probably a lot of validity to it, and is actually one of the reasons that I'm pairing or mirroring this Bible study series with a study of the ancient mystery schools, certain concepts, stuff like that. Anyway, let's go to it. It's the book is called Sargon the Magnificent, and it's by Mrs. Cindy Bristow. And let's see here. Where should we start? Okay, let's start. We'll read from chapter 7. I'm going to go for a little while. Chapter 7 of Sargon the Magnificent is entitled Sargon, King Cain. The strongest evidence of the identity of Sargon with Cain comes from the Babylonian inscriptions and will be given later, but solid grounds for holding it are supplied by several authorities who had no idea of suggesting that identification, a fact which makes their testimony all the more valuable. To begin with, the city which, as we read in the 4th chapter of Genesis, was built by Cain in the land of Nod, and which he called after the name of his son Enoch, was probably, according to Professor Sayce, the Babylonian city Unuk, or Erech, excavated by him. And yeah, I guess you need a little bit of, or it would be helpful if you had a little bit of Babylonian, ancient Babylon, Assyrian history. But yeah, it's definitely something to look into after listening to this. Just to make it a little more clear, I don't think we really have enough time to go into the entire history of the Babylonian and Assyrian empires. But anyways, I'll continue. And quote, "If I am right in identifying Unuk with the Enoch of Genesis, the city built by Cain in commemoration of his son," and this is from the Hibbert Lectures, 1887, page 185, and, quote, "Erech appears to have been one of the centers of Semitic influence in Babylonia from a very early period," end quote. Hibbert Lectures, page 185. The Cambridge History says of Sargon, his career began with the conquest of Erech, end quote, volume 1, page 404. Reasons for thinking that it began with the building rather than the conquest of Erech are given later. The facts that Erech is called, quote, the old city and the, quote, place of the settlement, and that, according to Professor Sayce, the name of Unuk is found on the oldest bricks, help to identify Erech with the Enoch built by Cain. As to the sudden and almost miraculous arrival of civilization and culture in Babylonia, Professor King writes, "We have found, in short, abundant remains of a bronze culture, but no traces of preceding ages of development, such as meet us on early Egyptian sites." This, of course, harmonizes with my belief that Cain, protected by some divine talisman, arrived suddenly in Babylonia, bringing with him the supernatural knowledge acquired by his parents. One writer, expressing his astonishment at the high grade of civilization and culture which is known to have existed in Babylonia in the time of Sargon, writes, "Surely such a people as this could not have sprung into existence as a deus ex machina. It must have had its history, a history which presupposes a development of several centuries more." from the Times History, Volume 1, page 356. The expression Deus ex machina, paraphrased by Dr. Brewer into an intervention of a god or some unlikely event, is curiously appropriate in connection with my belief that the Babylonian civilization was due to the sudden advent of Cain with his marvelous knowledge. And like I explained in the last lecture, what was Cain's remarkable and marvelous knowledge in? It was in farming and irrigation ditches. Anyways, not to continue. The first Adamites were presumably superhuman in both mind and body, which would account for the great ages to which they lived. We can easily imagine, therefore, how quickly Cain, divinely protected by some mysterious mark, would become the leader, teacher, and absolute lord and master of an inferior race. As if in support of this suggestion, Professor Sayce writes, quote, "Slavery was part of the foundation upon which Babylonian society rested," end quote, from Babylonia and Assyria, page 67. The Bronze Age of Babylonia, which arrived so suddenly, and from a modern scientific point of view so unaccountably, may well be attributed to Cain, by those who accept as history the first chapters of Genesis, from which we infer that the earliest Adamites possessed a full knowledge of much which was lost sight of for long centuries, and only painfully relearned in later times. As Dr. Kitto writes, to dress and keep the Garden of Eden, Adam not only required the necessary implements, but also the knowledge of operations for ensuring future produce, the use of water, and the various trainings of the plants and trees. Dr. Kitto asks how Adam could have done the work appointed for him without iron instruments. Iron cannot be brought into a serviceable state without processes and instruments which it seems impossible to imagine could have been first possessed, except in the way of supernatural communication. To make iron requires previous iron. Tubal-Cain most probably lived before the death of Adam, and he acquired fame as a hammerer, a universal workman in brass and iron. Genesis 4, verse 22. We gather, therefore, that Tubal-Cain's ancestor Cain may have taken the knowledge of arts and crafts into Babylonia. The tempter had told Eve that the fruit of the tree of knowledge would make her and Adam as gods. What limit, therefore, can be put into their capabilities? Discoveries witness to the fact that the culture of Babylonia in Sargon's time was of a very high order, and that the art of that period excelled all later art. No adequate explanation for this fact can be found unless we believe that Sargon was Cain, and had inherited the miraculous knowledge of his parents. Referring to the perfection of the earliest works of Babylonian art, which he ascribes to the reign of Sargon, Professor Kittel says that they, quote, lay the axe to the dogma of a continuous and unbroken line of evolution, end quote, and that they far excel any of the later Babylonian art and also that of the early Greek period. Describing some Babylonian works, he says, the surprising delicacy of execution, the noble beauty and fidelity to nature by which these representations are characterized, must excite the rapture of everyone who sees them. They would, in my judgment, do honor to the Atelier of Vegas or a Dondorf. They come down to us from the time of Sargon I, and therefore belong, at the latest, to the 4th, perhaps even to the 5th millennium before Christ. The material of these figures, as determined by a thorough chemical examination, consists of an alloy of copper and antimony. How, the professor asks, can we account for the existence of this beautiful art in earliest Babylonia, and how can we explain the fact that a, quote, degradation must have taken place, a species of intellectual impoverishment, a retrograde movement, and a falling off from a previous higher stage of culture? In my opinion, and I'm still reading from the book, this beautiful and realistic art was introduced by Cain, and the question of its degradation will be discussed later. Unfortunately, the British Museum possesses no example of the true art described by Professor Kittel. All that we find there is in the usual hieratic, mock-archaic style. And we'll do Chapter 8 as well. Sargon's name synonymous with King Cain. Another indication of the identity of Cain with the Babylonian Sargon is that this name, variously rendered Sargon, Sargoni, Sarukinu, Shargani, etc., may reasonably be taken as synonymous with King Cain. The first syllable Sar or Shar, meaning ruler or king in Babylonia, and obviously the origin of Shah, Zar, Sahib, Sire, or Sir, while the second syllable Gan, Gani, Gina, or Kinu is very like Cain. George Smith writes, several of the other names of antediluvian patriarchs correspond with Babylonian words and roots, such as Cain with Gina and Kinu. We also, it seems, have the right to believe that Sargon's date, circa 3800 BC, agrees with Cain's. Accepting Archbishop Usher's reckoning, which has never been discredited, Adam was created about the year 4004 BC, and he is said to have lived 930 years. Cain may have been born soon after 4004 BC, and may, like Adam's other descendants before the flood, have lived many hundreds of years. That Sargon lived long is indicated by the tales of his marvelous exploits and travels. It seems necessary indeed to picture the Babylonian king as endowed with longevity, and this would account for the enormous gaps in Babylonian history which Assyriologists fill up with admittedly conjectural kings and even dynasties. The great ages of the biblical patriarchs are sometimes treated as fabulous, but the words in the 6th chapter of Genesis, quote, "Yet his days shall be 120 years," end quote, seem to imply that the human life was to be curtailed, and while there is no evidence that men did not live to the great ages mentioned in the Bible, the whole weight of tradition tends to show that they did. The gods and the demigods of the Egyptians were said by the priests to have lived many hundreds of years, and to adopt Professor Cattell's line of argument, would they have imagined that longevity if it had never existed? Although the Jews are known to have disputed as to whether it was common to all men to live to a great age in those times, they never questioned the longevity of the patriarchs. Josephus gives a list of ancient authorities who held that the ancients lived nearly 1,000 years, and suggests a common-sense reason for those long lives, saying, quote, "And besides, God afforded them a longer time of life on account of their virtue, and the good use they made of it in astronomical and geometrical discoveries, which would not have afforded the time of foretelling the period of the stars, unless they had lived 600 years, for the great year is completed in that interval." So what he's saying is that he's ascribing the knowledge and the magnificent, astronomical and geometrical discoveries, because back then these ancient Mesopotamian cultures, they were totally well versed in astronomy and geometry. They were builders, and what this person is claiming is that the astronomical knowledge, without a form of writing or anything like that, how would they have known these astronomical dates and stuff like that? Because they knew about 600-year periods, they knew about equinoxes, and they were also talking about things that would take 1,000 years to come to pass. And how would they have been able to record these things without having a written language in the early times? And it's a good question. And to continue, in answer to an inquiry at the British Museum, the secretary wrote, quoting Mr. A.C.D. Cromlin of the Astronomer Royal Staff at Greenwich, quote, "It appears that the 600-year period alluded to by Josephus consists of two of the most satisfactory cycles, that is, 300 years for the calculation of total eclipses. How the ancient astronomers became aware of these cycles seems to be unknown." End quote. This ancient knowledge can therefore only be accounted for in the way that Josephus suggests or is direct revelation. Another reason for the longevity of the patriarchs is suggested by a writer who points out that Adam lived with Methuselah for about 233 years, that Methuselah died in the year of the deluge, and that therefore, quote, "there was only one person needed, the godly Methuselah, to transmit the sacred Hebrew records from Adam. the first father of mankind, to Noah, and second father of mankind. And thus is illustrated one purpose for which a few godly lives were so prodigiously prolonged before the deluge. The Chinese, too, have accounts of primeval longevity in their records. One writer says, "It is a curious circumstance that the Emperor Hoang-Ti, who, by the chronology of China, must have been contemporary with the patriarch Ryu, Abraham's great-great-grandfather, when the life of man was shortened to about 300 years, proposed by an inquiry in a medical book of which he was the author, whence it has happened that the lives of their forefathers were so long compared with the lives of the then present generation." Finally, a Babylonian list of kings has lately been found in which the reigns of the kings are almost exactly the same length as the lives of Adam and his descendants. Adam, for example, lived 930 years, while the first king in the list is said to have reigned 900 years. Seth lived 912 years, while King Zugagib lived 940 years. Enos lived 905 years, while Etana reigned 635 years. And the eighth king is said to have reigned 1200 years, thus outdoing Methuselah, who only lived 969 years. What explanation can there be for the remarkable resemblance between the duration of the reigns of the Babylonian kings and that of the lives of the biblical patriarchs, unless it be that one list was copied from the other, or still more likely, that they are independent records of the same personages? My own conviction is that the so-called dynastic list is simply a disguised reference to the ages of the earliest biblical characters, that the different names given to these kings were invented by the priests, and that there are no grounds for concluding, as some writers have done, that this list of Babylonian kings is older than the Bible records. All right. All right, well, that's from that book, Sargon the Magnificent by Mrs. Sidney Bristow. And that's a very good read. I suggest anybody should get a hold of that book and get it done. All right, we're going to start in chapter 5 of the book of Genesis with the generations of Adam. Ha-Adam, the Adam. This is Genesis chapter 5 verse 1. This is the book of the generations of Adam. In the day that God created man, in the likeness of God made he him. Verse 2. Male and female created he them, blessed them, and called their name Adam, or Ha-Adam, in the day when they were created. And Adam lived 130 years, and begat a son in his own likeness, after his image, and called his name Seth. Alright, you will notice here that neither Cain or Abel are talked about in this genealogy. It's fairly obvious why Abel wouldn't be. Why? Because he was slew by Cain, and he would not be the line through which Christ would come, or he who would bruise the serpent's head. But why wouldn't Cain be? Words to the wise. Verse 4, And the days of Adam after he had begotten Seth were 800 years, and he begat sons and daughters. And all the days that Adam lived were 930 years, and he died. And Seth lived 105 years, and begat Enos. And Seth lived after he begat Enos 807 years, and begat sons and daughters. And all the days of Seth were 912 years, and he died. And Enos lived 90 years, and begat Canaan. Alright. Now if you remember, I started talking about how, in the last lecture, about how you should really keep track of what these names actually mean. A lot of them will sort of be prophetic in a way of what's going to happen to that character or his descendants. And here we have Canaan, which actually means a possession. Later in the books of history, Judges, Samuel, and Kings, and Joshua, you will see that Israel, in fact, will possess this land, hence the name, a possession. Verse 10, And Enos lived after he begat Canaan 815 years, and begat sons and daughters. And all the days of Enos were 905 years, and he died. And Canaan lived 70 years, and begat Mahalaleel. What does Mahalaleel mean? It means praise of God. So the possession has begat the praise of God, or, the land that Israel taken, signified by the name of Canaan, would produce praise of God. And Canaan lived after he begat Mahalaleel 840 years, and begat sons and daughters. And all the days of Canaan were 910 years, and he died. And Mahalaleel lived 65 years, and begat Jared. Now Jared means the descent. And when we come to it later, you will see that these names will actually correlate with what was happening during these days, which we'll get into in verse 6. But keep this in mind. We have the possession begetting the praise of God, begetting the descent, which is symbolic of the descent of the fallen angels. But we'll get into that in a second. Verse 16. And Mahalaleel lived after he begat Jared 830 years, and begat sons and daughters. And all the days of Mahalaleel were 895 years, and he died. And Jared lived 162 years, and he begat Enoch. And Jared lived after he begat Enoch 800 years, and begat sons and daughters. And all the days of Jared were 962 years, and he died. And Enoch lived 65 years, and begat Methuselah. So here we have Enoch, which means the teaching or the initiation. And Methuselah, meaning when he is dead, it shall be sent, probably meaning the flood. So here, to go through the chronology of these names, we have Canaan, a possession or a land, which will later become the land that Israel possesses, that was promised. So we have the possession or the land. The neck begets a praise of God, Mahalaleel. Following then is Jared, which means the descent. And then we have Enoch, which would lead to the teaching or the initiation. And then after that would come to pass Methuselah, which means when he is dead, the flood is going to come. Verse 22. And Enoch walked with God, after he begat Methuselah 300 years, and begat sons and daughters. And all the days of Enoch were 365 years. And Enoch walked with God, and he was not, for God took him. Now something very interesting has happened here, very important. First off, Enoch never died. God took him from the world. Why? Because he walked with God. And in these days, we see the falling away of man morally through Enos back in the last lecture, and now we see that God takes Enoch because he walked with God. And you can almost assume that no one up until that point was really, walking with God. So, God also will take Elijah in 2 Kings in very much the same way. Elijah never dies. And you'll also see that there's a controversy whether Moses died in the ordinary fashion, which we'll get into that when we make it there. But yeah, the three people in the Bible that never died: Enoch, Elijah, and Moses. And now that we've mentioned Enoch, there is something that is called the Book of Enoch, and I'm going to go to Wikipedia and read a little bit about the Book of Enoch. If I can get there. Alright, the Book of Enoch, or First Enoch, is an ancient Jewish religious work, traditionally ascribed to Enoch, the great-grandfather of Noah. It is not part of the biblical canon. It is regarded as canonical by the Ethiopian Orthodox Church and Eritrean Orthodox Tewahedo Church, but no other Christian group. The older sections, mainly in the Book of the Watchers, are estimated to date from about 300 BC, and the latest part, the Book of the Parables, probably was composed at the end of the 1st century BC. There are parts of the Book of Enoch quoted in the New Testament, and I think you could actually show it that at least the apostles were aware of the book of Enoch and the things contained in the book of Enoch. It's quoted, and the idea of that we'll get into in verse 6 or chapter 6, which maybe I should finish chapter 6 or get there before I go into this, the book of Enoch. Yeah, let's go ahead and finish the chapter. And Methuselah lived 187 years and begat Lamech, which Lamech means strength or powerful. And Methuselah lived after he begat Lamech 782 years and begat sons and daughters. And all the days of Methuselah were 969 years, and he died. And Lamech lived 182 years and begat a son. And something I want to bring attention to, something that maybe, I don't know, write it down or something. And back in chapter 4, verse 18, that Cain also has a descendant named Methuselah that gives birth to a Lamech. This is key information to keep up on. Many names between the descendants of Cain and the descendants of Adam will be very similar, and here in this example they even have the same names. Verse 29, and he called his name Noah, saying, this same shall comfort us concerning our work and toil of our hands, because of the ground which the Lord hath cursed. Some scholars believe in this verse should be translated more to an effect that the evil cursing was because of the toil of their hands. But be that as it may, Noah, meaning rest or comfort, keep that in mind. See, another example of his name being the meaning of behind what he would do. So Noah meaning rest or comfort. In 29, the same shall comfort us concerning our work and toil of our hands. Anyways, verse 30, and Lamech lived after he begat Noah 595 years, and begat sons and daughters. And all the days of Lamech were 777 years, and he died. And notice Lamech means strength, and he lived 777 years, and he died. Noah was 500 years old, and Noah begat Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Alright, now we've gotten to chapter 6. Now, this is a very important chapter as well. To begin, I'm going to skip to the book of Matthew, chapter 24, verse 36. And Jesus is talking about the end times. Now, okay. First off, Matthew chapter 24, verse 36. But of that day and hour knoweth no man, no, not the angels of heaven, but my Father only. Now, yeah, so we're talking about, the end of the world. Matthew 24, verse 37, but as the days of Noah were, so shall also the coming of the Son of Man be. For as in the days that were before the flood they were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage, until the day that Noah entered into the ark, and knew not until the flood came and took them all away. So shall also the coming of the Son of Man be. Alright, so what Jesus is saying right here is that in the end times, when he would come back to the earth, it will be like in the days of Noah. Eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage. Well, marrying and giving in marriage, that's always going on. So this is obviously talking about something a little bit different. So they're eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage. And it would be like as in the days of Noah. Well, here in chapter 6 of Genesis, we're going to see what these days were like and what to look for, biblically, as to what would be going on, or what will be going on, when Jesus Christ will have come back. So, here we go. Genesis chapter 6, verse 1. And it reads, And it came to pass, when men began to multiply, HaAdam, which is the man, or the descendants of Adam, began to multiply on the face of the earth, and daughters were born unto them. Verse 2, that the sons of God saw the daughters of men, that they were fair, and they took them wives of all which they chose. Sons of God must, in this verse, be translated as angels or members. Some people like to say they're the descendants of the Sethites, but the way in which man is written, it says HaAdam, which would be the descendants of Adam. So you'll see here in the next couple of verses that there is a distinction created by the writer between the sons of God, or the supernatural, and the daughters of men, the physical. Okay. And the Lord said, in verse 3, My spirit shall not always strive with man, for that he also is flesh, yet his days shall be 120 years. And again, HaAdam. The Lord said, My spirit shall not always strive with HaAdam, for that he also is flesh, yet his days shall be 120 years. Verse 4, listen up. There were giants in the earth in those days, and also after that. And also after that. I'm going to read it again. There were giants in the earth in those days, and also after that. What does that mean? In Numbers, the book of Numbers, 13 verse 33, and other places in the wars of Joshua, you will see that regardless, there's going to be a flood here. If you're not informed of the book of Genesis, there's going to be a flood of Noah coming up, and the purpose of it is to destroy these giants. And this further, goes with the fact that the flood of Noah was more contained in an area than the actual entire world. But also that theory has to be kept open because, it just does. Other places seem to support that, even though a lot of times I like to contribute that to a different flood in a different time period, in that Noah's flood was actually contained in an area. But you'll see, and later on in the Bible, that these giants will not entirely be taken care of by the flood. Why? It's hard telling. There's theories behind it, but regardless, let's continue. There were giants in the earth in those days, and also after that, when the sons of God came in unto the daughters of men, and they bare children to them. The same became mighty men which were of old, men of renown. Here, giants is translated as nephil, or to fall. But into contrast between, Zacharias Sitchin, kind of the mystery school interpretation, the Nephilim were not the fallen angels themselves. They were called the sons of God. The Nephil, or the Nephilim, were the offspring of angel and human. And this is against, you'll see that this is not what God wanted to happen. Anyways, and also go back to the reference as it was in the days of Noah. We can see here that what's happening is angels were coming to humans to mate with them because they found them attractive. Take that how you will. Many occultic initiations and mystery school rituals will have a ritual or initiation near the end usually, and it's symbolic or possibly literal. And it describes it as a sexual relation with a fallen angel or a spirit or higher entity. So in these rituals, it's kind of a reproduction of what the fallen angels did when they came to earth. These mystery schools believe that they will take on some qualities of the divine and be man and God, or Christ mixed together, mixed together, and they usually have a very different interpretation of Christ than what would be believed from a Bible reader. And also something extremely important about these verses is I want you to see the connection between Genesis chapter 3, where the serpent came to the garden, and this chapter where the sons of God have come to earth to mate with the sons of men. And in the last lecture we showed that the serpent would have physical or spiritual or both offspring, and that the woman's seed would bruise his seed, while the serpent's seed would bruise the heel. Now in chapter 6 we've just read that the sons of God are angels, spiritual beings, have come down and mated with the women and created offspring. So we have now had two occurrences of supernatural beings going against the Word of God to come down and mix their seed with the seed of the descendants of Adam. Keep it in mind. I think this will be a good time to read from the Companion Bible, Appendix number 23. And here we go. It is only by the divine specific act of creation that any created being can be called a son of God. For that which is born of the flesh is flesh. God is spirit, and that which is born of the spirit is spirit. John 3 verse 6. Hence Adam is called a son of God. This is why angels are called sons of God in every other place where the expression is used in the Old Testament. Job 1:6, 2 verse 1, 38 verse 7, Psalms 29 verse 1, 89 verse 6, Daniel chapter 3 verse 25. We have no authority or right to take the expression in Genesis 6:2 and 4 in any other sense. Moreover, in Genesis 6 verse 2 the Septuagint renders it angels. Angels are called spirits. That there was a fall of the angels is certain from Jude verse 6. The nature of their fall is clearly stated in the same verse. They left their own okyterion, or habitation. The nature of their sin is stated to be in like manner to that of the subsequent sins of Sodom and Gomorrah. The time of their fall is given as having taken place in the days of Noah, though there may have been a prior fall which caused the end of the world that then was, which we mentioned earlier. For this sin they are reserved unto judgment, according to 2 Peter chapter 2 verse 4, and are in prison. Their progeny, called the Nephilim, translated as giants, were monsters of sin, and being superhuman in size and character had to be destroyed. This is the one and only object of the flood. Now I'm going to interject here. Yeah, like I mentioned earlier, this flood, and the main reason the flood is coming, is because fallen angels have mated with women, and their offspring were quote-unquote men of renown, men of old, legendary warriors. Only Noah and his family had preserved their pedigree pure from Adam. All the rest had become corrupt. The only remedy was to destroy it as it had become destroyed. This eruption of fallen angels was of Satan. Alright, that's the end of that companion. We're going to go over to Appendix 25, and this is on the Nephilim, or the giants. This eruption of fallen angels was Satan's first attempt to prevent the coming of the seed of woman, foretold in Genesis 3:15. If this could be accomplished, God's word would have failed, and his own doom would be averted. As soon as it was made known that the seed of the woman was to become through Abraham, there must have been another eruption as recorded in Genesis 6:4, quote unquote, and also after that. The aim of the enemy was to occupy Canaan in advance of Abraham. Like I was talking about earlier, Canaan was the land that was promised to Abraham and his descendants later in the Bible. So, in the words of Joshua, when they're encountering not fallen angels, but giants and stuff, and he's killing them wholesale, it's because this is the area where the fallen angels were, and that hadn't been destroyed by the flood or came at a later time. But anyway, the aim of the enemy was to occupy Canaan in advance of Abraham, and so to contest his occupation by his seed. For when Abraham entered Canaan, the Canaanite was then, that is to already in the land. In the same chapter, we see Satan's next attempt to interfere with Abraham's seed and frustrate the purpose of God that it should be in Isaac. This great conflict may be seen throughout the Bible, and it forms a great important subject of biblical study. In each case, the human instrument had his own personal interest to serve, while Satan had his own great objective in view. Hence God had in each case to interfere and avert the evil and the danger, of which his servants and people were wholly ignorant. The following assaults of the great enemy stand out prominently. The destruction of the chosen family by famine, Genesis 50, verse 20. The destruction of the male line in Israel in Exodus 1, verse 10 through 15. The destruction of the whole nation in Pharaoh's pursuit, Exodus 14. After David's line was singled out, that was the next selected for assault. Satan's first assault was in the union of Jehoram and Athaliah by Jehoshaphat. The Arabians slew all his children except Ahaziah. When Ahaziah died, Athaliah killed all the seed royal. The babe Joash alone was rescued, and for 6 years the faithfulness of Jehovah's word was at stake. Hezekiah was childless when a double assault was made by the king of Assyria and the king of terrors. God's faithfulness was appealed to and relied on. Okay. Let's see. The eruption of the fallen angels was the first attempt and was directed against the whole human race, according to Bullinger. When Abraham was called, he and his seed were attacked. When David was enthroned, the royal line was assailed. And when the seed of woman himself came, the storm burst upon him. Anyways, let's go to appendix. Let's see. Then we'll go on to the next appendix. I think I'm reading the same one, actually. Okay. Anyways, the progeny of the fallen angels with the daughters of Adam are called in Genesis 6 the Nephilim, or the Nephilim, which means fallen ones. What these beings were can be gathered only from Scripture. They were evidently great in size as well as great in wickedness. They were superhuman, abnormal beings, and their destruction was necessary for the preservation of the human race. Or, as I showed, that it was a preservation of the Christ bloodline. This was why the flood was brought upon the world of the ungodly in 2 Peter chapter 2 verse 5, as prophesied by Enoch. But we read of the Nephilim again in Numbers 13:33. There we saw the Nephilim, the sons of Enoch, which come to the Nephilim. How, it may be asked, could this be if they were all destroyed in the flood? The answer is contained in Genesis 6:4, where we read that there were Nephilim in the earth in those days, that is to say, in the days of Noah, and also after that, when the sons of God came in unto the daughters of men, and they bare children to them, the same became the mighty men, Hebrew Geber. And when you're doing your Hebrew studies, always remember that word, Geber, because from here on out, it's almost generally always translated as the heroes, or literally giants, which were of old men of renown. So that, quote unquote, after that, was a second eruption of the fallen angels, evidently smaller in number and more limited in area, for they were for the most part confined to Canaan, and were in fact known as the nations of Canaan. It was for the destruction of these that the sword of Israel was necessary, as the flood had been before. As to the date of this second eruption, it was evidently soon after it became known that the seed was to come through Abraham, for when he came out of Haran and entered to Canaan, the significant fact is stated that the Canaanite was then already in the land. In Genesis 14:5, they were already known as the Rephaim and the Emim, and had established themselves as Ashtaroth, Karnaim, and Shaveh Kiriathaim. In chapter 15:18, verse 21, they are enumerated and named among Canaanite peoples. Kenites, which is the descendants of Cain, and the Kenizzites. So here's everyone that's in Canaan at this time. The Kenites, the descendants of Cain, the Kenizzites, and the Cadmonites, and the Hittites, and the Perizzites, and the Rephaims, and the Amorites, and the Girgashites, and the Jebusites. These were to be cut off and driven out and utterly destroyed. But Israel failed in this, and we know not how many got away to other countries to escape the general destruction. If this were recognized, it would go far to solve many problems connected with anthropology. The other names, they were called the Anakim, from one Anak, which came of the Nephilim, and Rephaim from Rapha, another notable one among them. They were known as the Emim, the Horim, and the Zamzumim. As Rephaim, they were all well known and are often mentioned, but unfortunately, instead of this, their proper name being preserved, it is variously translated as dead, deceased, or giants. Dead or deceased. These Rephaim are to have no resurrection. This fact is stated in Isaiah 26:14, where the proper name is rendered deceased, and verse 19, where it is rendered the dead. Now this is very important. It is rendered dead 7 times. It is rendered deceased in Isaiah 26:14. It is retained as proper name Rephaim 10 times. In all other places it is rendered giants. By reading all these passages, the Bible student may know all that can be known about these beings. It is certain that the second eruption took place before Genesis 14, for there the Rephaim were mixed up with the 5 nations or peoples, which included Sodom and Gomorrah, and were defeated by the 4 kings under Chedorlaomer. The principal locality was located, evidently, Ashtaroth Karnaim, while the Emim were in the plain of Kiriathaim. Anak was a noted descendant of the Nephilim, Rapha another, giving their names respectively to different clans. Anak's father was Arba, the original builder of Hebron. And this Palestine branch of the Anakim was not called Abraham after him, but Anakim after Anak. They were great, mighty, and tall, evidently inspiring the 10 spies with great fear. Og, king of Bashan, is described in Deuteronomy 3, verse 11, which is also... So you can see here that even E.W. Bullinger is completely convinced that this is a very important topic in the early Bible, these nations that were supposedly intermixed with fallen angels. Their strength is seen in the giant cities of Bashan. Today, we know not how far they may have been utilized by Egypt in the construction of buildings, which is still an unsolved problem. Arba was rebuilt by the Kabiri or Confederates 7 years after Zoan and was built by Egypt pharaohs of the 19th dynasty. If these Nephilim and the branch of Rephaim were associated with Egypt, we have an explanation of the problem which has for ages perplexed all engineers as to how these huge stones and monuments were brought together. Why not in Egypt as well as in the giant cities of Bashan, which exist as such to this day? And from Greek mythology, there's even a type of architecture attributed to giants. It's called Cyclopean masonry, and its distinctive feature is that there are large boulders, very, very lightly hewn, that are stacked together in order to build walls. Because I don't know, I guess apparently the giants of Greece weren't that intelligent and just decided to throw rocks together instead of chisel them down. But anyway, back to the appendix. Moreover, we have in these mighty men, the men of renown, the explanation of the origin of the Greek mythology. Well, I guess that went right into that. That mythology was no mere invention of the human brain, but it grew out of the traditions and memories and legends of the doings of that mighty race of beings, and was gradually evolved out of the heroes. The fact that they were supernatural in their origin formed an easy step to their being regarded as the demigods of the Greeks. Thus the Babylonian creation tablets, the Egyptian Book of the Dead, and Greek mythology, and other heathen cosmogonies, which by some are set on an equality with Scripture, or by others adduced in support of it, are all the corruption and perversion of primitive truths, distorted in proportion as their origin was forgotten and their memories faded away. And God saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every imagination of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. That was verse 5. I kind of jumped ahead. And God saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every imagination of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. And it repented the Lord that he had made man on the earth, and it grieved him at his heart. And the Lord said, I will destroy man, whom I have created from the face of the earth. Now remember, earth means eretz, or land. It doesn't necessarily mean the whole world. Both man and beast, and the creeping thing, and the fowls of the air, for it repenteth me that I have made them. But Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord. Now this is your first time. Well, I don't know. I guess maybe you could consider Enoch, but this is one of the first times it shows in the Bible that God has decided to do something, and that it just takes one person to find grace in the eyes of God, and it'll change what he's going to do. Verse 9. These are the generations of Noah. Noah was a just man and perfect in his generations. Perfect in his generations. And Noah walked with God. So here we have the first man to walk with God since Enoch. Perfect in his generations. This refers to his physical pedigree. It has nothing to do with his moral state, his belief. I mean, he's perfect in his generations by the fact that he had not mixed with the fallen angels. This seed line, which God promised the serpent, which would bruise his head, will remain an important topic. And, a lot of the Bible revolves around this whole subject. Verse 10. And Noah begat 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. The earth also was corrupt before God, and the earth was filled with violence. And God looked upon the earth, and behold, it was corrupt, for all flesh had corrupted his way upon the earth. And notice here that God is not blaming the sons of God, but he's blaming humanity. Interesting topic. So what was going on in these times? And I mentioned the book of Enoch earlier, and it's an interesting subject because no one knows for a fact if this is the book of Enoch or the actual first eye account or whatever. But like I said, the apostles were at least aware of this story. And I'm going to read from the Ethiopian book of Enoch, which is the first one, which is supposed to be the oldest. It was found in Ethiopia. And it's also, like I mentioned earlier, the Ethiopian Orthodox Church believes in its authenticity, probably because it was found there. But this book I'm going to read for claims to be the eyewitness account of Enoch during the days of the giants. And the whole point of this is just to reiterate the fact that people, even ancient peoples, believed that this is what it was talking about, to counter the Sethite argument. They believed in hybridized human beings of fallen angels. Anyways, to read chapter 1, the lost book of Enoch, Ethiopian Enoch, it reads, The words of the blessing of Enoch, with which he blessed the elect and righteous who will be living in the day of tribulation, when all the wicked and godless are to be removed. And he began his story saying, Enoch, a righteous man, whose eyes were opened by God, saw the vision of the Holy One in heaven, which the angel showed me. And I heard everything from them, and saw and understood, but it was not for this generation, but for a remote one, which is to come. Concerning the elect, I said, as I began my story, the Holy Great One will come out from his dwelling, and the eternal God will tread on the earth, even on Mount Sinai, and appear in the strength of his might from heaven. And all shall be very afraid, and the watchers shall shake. The watchers. Notice this, the watchers. And great fear and trembling shall seize them to the ends of the earth. And the high mountains shall be shaken, and the high hills shall be laid low, and shall melt like wax in the flame. And the earth shall be wholly torn apart, and all that is on the earth shall be destroyed, and there shall be a judgment on all. But with the righteous he will make peace, and will protect the elect, and mercy shall be upon them. And they shall all belong to God, and they shall prosper, and they shall all be blessed, and the light of God shall shine on them. And behold, he comes with 10,000 of his holy ones, saints to execute judgment on all. And just to mention, this is one of the verses that's mentioned. This is mirrored in Jude chapter 1, verse 14. And to destroy all the ungodly, and to convict all flesh of all the works of their ungodliness which they have ungodly committed, and of all the hard things which ungodly sinners have spoken against him. Observe everything that takes place in the sky. This is chapter 2. Now pay attention. What did we talk about in the first lecture about the stars being for signs and for seasons and all that? Observe everything that takes place in the sky, how the lights do not change their orbits, and the luminaries which are in heaven, how they all rise and set in order, each in its season, and do not transgress against their appointed order. Consider the earth, and give understanding to the things which take place on it from start to finish, how steadfast they are, how none of the things on the earth change, but all the works of God appear to you. Behold the summer and the winter, how the whole earth is filled with water, and clouds and dew and rain lie on it. Observe and see how all the trees seem as though they had withered and shed all their leaves, except 14 trees, which do not lose their foliage, but retain the old foliage from 2 to 3 years until the new comes. Now here, you're seeing why one of the main reasons people have trouble with the books of Enoch is because it's kind of a book of knowledge or magic in a way. And you'll see that it'll go into different seasonal deals, trees, and anyways. And again, observe the days of summer, how the sun is above the earth. And you seek shade and shelter because of the heat of the sun, and the earth also burns with growing heat, and so you cannot walk on the earth or on a rock because of its heat. Let's see, I'm going to try to skip forward here to something that actually pertains to what we're talking about. Okay, chapter 6, as in Genesis chapter 6. And it came to pass, when the children of men had multiplied, that in those days were born to them beautiful and fair daughters. And the angels, the sons of heaven, saw and lusted after them, and said to one another, Come, let us choose us wives from among the children of men, and have children with them. And Semjaza, who was their leader, said to them, I fear you will not agree to do this deed, and I alone shall have to pay the penalty of this great sin. And they all answered him and said, Let us swear an oath, and all bind ourselves by mutual curses, so we will not abandon this plan, but to do this thing. Then they all swore together and bound themselves by mutual curses. And they were in all 200 who descended in the days of Jared in the summit of Mount Hermon. Remember the days of Jared, the days of the descent, and the summit of Mount Hermon. And they called it Mount Hermon, because they had sworn and bound themselves by mutual curses on the act. And this is paralleled in Jude 1:5. I will therefore put you in remembrance, though you once knew this, how that the Lord, having saved the people out of the land of Egypt, afterward destroyed them that believed not. And the angel who kept not their first estate, but left their own habitation, he hath reserved in everlasting chains under darkness, and through the judgment of the great day. Now keep in mind, remember here, everlasting chains under darkness unto the judgment of the great day. Okay, verse 7 of chapter 6 of the book of Enoch we go into, and these are the names of their leaders: Samlazaz, their leader, Araklbah, Ramiel, Kokelblel, Tomlel, Ramlel, Donel, Ezekiel, and Barachiel. Ezael, Armaros, Batarel, Ananel, Zachiel, Samsapil, Satarel, Terel, Jamjael, and Sariel. These are the chiefs of tens. Chapter 7. And all of them together went and took wives for themselves, each choosing one for himself. And they began to go into them, and to defile themselves with sex with them. And the angels taught them charms and spells, and the cutting of roots, and made them acquainted with plants. So here we're going to go into how these fallen angels came down to earth and started revealing sorceries, how to do, sciences and stuff like that. And it's kind of funny if you think about it, because you can imagine these angels coming down and claiming that they had all this divine knowledge. They could explain to them how the world worked, but what was that quid pro quo? Is that they'd have to sleep with them, and apparently men never change, even in their angelic form. But anyways, and the women became pregnant, and they bare large giants, whose height was 3,000 cubits. The giants consumed all the work and toil of men, and when men could no longer sustain them, the giants turned against them and devoured mankind. And they began to sin against birds and beasts and reptiles and fish, and to devour one another's flesh and drink the blood. So yeah, here we see these giants. What's the main problem with the giants? Basically, they just eat too much. So they began to wipe out birds and beasts and reptiles and fish because of their hunger, I would imagine. Verse 6, Then the earth laid accusation against the lawless ones. Chapter 8, And Azazel taught men to make swords and knives and shields and breastplates, and taught them about metals of the earth, and the art of working them, and bracelets and ornaments, and the use of antimony, and the beautifying of the eyelids, and all kinds of precious stones, and all coloring and dyes. And there was great impiety. They turned away from God and committed fornication, and they were led astray and became corrupt in all their ways. Semjazah taught the casting of spells and root cuttings. Armoros taught counterspells. Barachiel taught astrology. Kokabel taught the constellations. Ezekiel taught the knowledge of the clouds or meteorology. Arachiel the signs of the earth. Shamsiel the signs of the sun. And Sariel the course of the moon. And as men perished, they cried, and their cry went up to heaven. And then Michael, Uriel, Raphael, and Gabriel looked down from heaven and saw much blood being shed on earth, and all lawlessness being done. And they said to each other, Let the cries from the destruction of earth ascend up to the gates of heaven. And now to you, the holy ones of heaven, the souls of men make their petition, saying, Bring our cause before the Most High. And they said to the Lord of the ages, Lord of lords, God of gods, King of kings, and God of the ages, the throne of your glory endures through all the generations of the ages, and your name holy and glorious and blessed to all the ages. You have made all things, and you have power over all things, and all things are revealed and open in your sight, and you see all things, and nothing can hide itself from you. Look at what Azazel has done, who has taught all unrighteousness on earth, and revealed the eternal secrets which were made and kept in heaven, which men were striving to learn. And Samjazah, who taught spells, to whom you gave authority to rule over his associates. And they have gone to the daughters of men on the earth, and have had sex with the women, and have defiled themselves, and revealed to them all kinds of sins. And the women have borne giants, and the whole earth has thereby been filled with blood and unrighteousness. And now, behold, the souls of those who have died are crying out and making their petition to the gates of heaven, and their lament has ascended and cannot cease because of the lawless deeds which are done on the earth. And you know all things before they come to pass, and you see these things, and you have permitted them, and say nothing to us about these things. What are we to do with them about these things? Then said the Most High, the great and holy one, Uriel, go to the son of Lamech. Say to him, Go to Noah, and tell him, In my name hide yourself, and reveal to him the end that is approaching, that the whole earth will be destroyed, and a flood is about to come on the whole earth, and will destroy everything on it. And now instruct him as to what he must do to escape, that his offspring may be preserved for all the generations of the world. And again the Lord said to Raphael, Bind Azazel hand and foot, and cast him into the darkness, and split open the desert which is in Dudael, and cast him in. And fill the hole by covering him rough and jagged rocks, and cover him with darkness, and let him live there forever, and cover his face, that he may not see the light. Azazel, you'll see, is actually in the Old Testament, but it's translated in a strange way. And we might just wait till we get there. But yeah, he's basically the evil spirit of the desert. Verse 6, And on the day of the great judgment he shall be hurled into the fire, and heal the earth which the angels have ruined, and proclaim the healing of the earth, for I will restore the earth and heal the plague. That not all of the children of men may perish through all the secret things that the watchers have disclosed and have taught their sons. So here you have the watchers are disclosing the secret information to the daughters of men and to their sons. So this would make these half-breeds, super intelligent. They had knowledge of magic and sorcery, basically, and they were big and strong. Verse 8, The whole earth has been corrupted through the works that were taught by Azazel. To him ascribe all sin. To Gabriel said the Lord, Proceed against the bastards and the reprobates, and against the children of fornication, and destroy the children of fornication and the children of the watchers. Cause them to go against one another, that they may destroy each other in battle. No request that the watchers their fathers make of you shall be granted them on their behalf, for they hope to live in eternal life, and that each one of them will live 500 years. And the Lord said to Michael, Go bind Semjazah and his team, who have associated with women and have defiled themselves in all their uncleanness. When their sons have slain one another, and they have seen the destruction of their beloved ones, bind them fast for 70 generations under the hills of the earth, until the day of the consummation of their judgment, and until the eternal judgment is accomplished. And there's a note here, 70 generations of 500 years equals 35,000 years. And that number will come up again in the Mystery Babylon series, 35,000 years. And in those days they shall be led off to the abyss of fire, into the torment and the prison in which they shall be confined forever. Then Samjazah shall be burnt up with the condemned, and they will be destroyed, having been bound together with them to the end of all generations. Destroy all the spirits of lust and the children of the watchers, because they have wronged mankind. Destroy all wrong from the face of the earth, and let every evil work come to an end, and let the plant of righteousness and truth appear. And it shall prove a blessing. The works of righteousness and truth shall be planted in truth and joy forevermore. And then shall all the righteous survive, and shall live until they beget thousands of children, and all the days of their youth and their old age shall they complete in peace. Then shall the whole earth be untilled in righteousness, and shall be planted with trees, and be full of blessing. And all the desirable trees shall be planted on it, and they shall plant vines on it. And the vine which they plant shall yield fruit in abundance. And as for all the seed which is sown, each measurement shall bear 1,000, and each measurement of olives shall yield 10 presses of oil. You shall cleanse the earth from all oppression, and from all unrighteousness, from all sin, from all godlessness, and all the uncleanness that is brought on the earth you shall destroy from off the earth. All the children of men shall become righteous, and all nations shall offer adoration and shall praise me, and all shall worship me. And the earth shall be cleansed from all defilement, from all sin, from all punishment, and from all torment. And I will never again send another flood from this generation to all generations and forever. Let's see here. There's a part I wanted to get to. Maybe that's all we really need to get into in this book for today. I'm sure I'll get into it again. There's a part in here that I'm looking for where it talks about the ultimate end of these giants. And what it is that they basically weren't allowed to go to heaven, and that their spirits would wander the world, wander the earth, and would end up being worshipped by people as gods. And that they would take the forms of familiar spirits, which, maybe that is where ghosts come from. The giants slayed by the flood. Anyways, just to back up the giants thing, let's see here. We'll skip that. but I'll give it to you for maybe a further study. Look for the Book of the Giants from the Qumran Scrolls. A lot of it's missing, and a lot of it's a little difficult to understand, but you will see that even in these scrolls, there is belief that the angels came down from heaven and mated with the sons of men, or the daughters of men, and created offspring. Alright. Genesis 6:13, let's get back to that. And God said unto Noah, the end of all flesh is come before me. For the earth is filled with violence through them, and behold, I will destroy them with the earth. Make thee an ark of gopher wood. Room shalt thou make in the ark, and shalt pitch it within and without with pitch. And this is the fashion which thou shalt make it. The length of the ark shall be 300 cubits, the breadth of it 50 cubits, and the height of it 30 cubits. A window. Oh, hold on, let me go back. I wanted to know when Genesis 6:14, make thee an ark of gopher wood. Room shall thou make in the ark, and shall pitch it within and without pitch. Now this word is actually the word for atonement. So, actually, what it's saying here is fill your cracks with atonement when you're making the ark. Because this ark will be, it's a form of salvation. Noah is a form of the next covenant with man at this point. A window shalt thou make to the ark, and in a cubit shalt thou finish it above. And the door of the ark shalt thou set in the side thereof. With lower, second, and third stories shalt thou make it. Now pay attention to this. This is even close to when okay, we'll just keep it at this. There's a first floor, a second floor, and a third floor. There's 3 stories. Verse 17, and behold, I, even I, do bring a flood of waters upon the earth, to destroy all flesh, wherein the breath of life from under heaven, and everything that is in the land shall die. But with thee will I establish my covenant, and thou shalt come into the ark, you and thy son, and thy wife, and thy sons' wives with thee. And every living thing of the flesh, 2 of every sort. Let's go back. Sorry about this. And of every living thing of all flesh, 2 of every sort shalt thou bring into the ark, to keep them alive with thee. They shall be male and female, of fowls after their kind, and of cattle after their kind, and of every creeping thing of the land after his kind. 2 of every sort shalt thou come into thee, and keep them alive. And take you into thee of all food that is eaten, and thou shalt gather it to thee, and it shall be for food for thee and for them. Thus did Noah, according all that God commanded him, so did he. Alright, I think I'm going to wrap it up. That was the book of Genesis, lecture number 2. I hope you enjoyed it. Hope you learned something. Tune in next time. Goodbye.